HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Undercover Edge. Find your hidden strengths, learn to adapt, and build the confidence to win life's game. By Derrick Levasseur. Read by Cendese. Introduction. The truth. I have to admit, this is a surreal moment for me. Full disclosure, I never envisioned myself as an author. In my mind, I'm just a normal guy who had the opportunity to work as an undercover detective at a very young age. Sure, I've had friends and acquaintances tell me I should write about my career, my personal life, and my stint on reality television. But I wouldn't write a book just to talk about what I've accomplished. The only reason I would take the time to put my thoughts on paper was if I felt I had something important to contribute, something that could benefit other people. After all, that's why I originally got into law enforcement, to help others. I can assure you that I don't do anything half-heartedly, so the fact that you're hearing my words in this book means that I do feel I have information that could be beneficial to you. About 3 years ago, I realized that my approach to interacting with people wasn't just who I was or Derrick being Derrick. The totality of circumstances throughout my life has led me to become the person I am today. It's also the reason I evaluate and communicate with others in the way that I do. My specialized law enforcement training and on-the-job experiences, coupled with social encounters outside of work, have created an effective approach to dealing with people that I use every day. Going undercover taught me how to define my goals, lead my team more effectively, and build confidence in my actions both in the rarest and in the more common everyday challenges. This isn't a single tactic or technique I employ. For me, it's a way of life. So the question is, how do I teach you the same approach? Should I have you apply to the police academy, become an undercover detective, put you in life-threatening situations where the wrong choice of words could get you killed? No. I think I have a better idea, and it's a whole lot safer. In this book, I've taken my 13 years of training and experience and condensed it into a series of lessons that will show you how I applied this knowledge to all aspects of my life. I should probably explain who I am and what I bring to the table before we get down to business. When I was officially sworn in as a police officer, I was only 20 years old, making me one of the youngest in my department's history. As soon as I graduated from the police academy and started my career as a patrolman, my supervisors noticed that, in addition to being young, I had a way with words, so I was recruited to work undercover. I remember getting the call from the chief of police for my first operation. This is the top guy in any department, and not someone a patrolman like myself usually hears from personally. It was the morning after my 21st birthday. Now, I'm not going to lie. I had a few celebratory drinks the night before, and I was a little under the weather. But as soon as I realized what he was asking me to do, I woke right up. Later that day, I posed as a college student at a major university, and when it was all said and done, we made multiple arrests and seized a large amount of drugs. After that experience, I was hooked. I knew I had found my calling. Undercover work came naturally to me, and I was able to adapt to most environments fairly easily. Over the years, I worked for multiple agencies, posing as a student, a drug dealer, a drug user, and several other characters. You might be thinking, wow, that must have been a lot of fun. Well, in many ways it was. But when you get right down to what the job actually entailed, like finding yourself alone in a room with a bunch of criminals, it was also very dangerous. I risked being discovered by the people I was trying to build a case against, and in many instances, these were bad people with a lot to lose. So it goes without saying that I've been in some scary situations. I'm excited for the opportunity to explain what I've learned during my time as a street cop, an undercover detective, and a sergeant. Very few people are aware of the information that investigators learn during the various schools we attend throughout our career. The purpose of this training is to keep us updated on the latest trends and techniques and how we can use them to our advantage. I'm convinced that once you obtain the knowledge I have gained during my training, you'll also enjoy many of the advantages it gave me both personally and professionally. The good news is that you're going to learn the same approach that I learned without exposing yourself to any of the life-threatening dangers that I faced. allowing you to reap the rewards without the risk. Police work is a lot like human chess. Of course, it's not an actual game. It's serious stuff and can have some real consequences. But still, the analogy holds true. In the Undercover Edge, we're going to go over a lot of information that will help you understand where people are coming from and why they do the things they do. Some of this may also help you better understand yourself and why you do some of the things you do, which can assist in planning your next move. I know there's one question that a perceptive listener will have at this point, and that is, why should I care about what you've learned as a detective or a supervisor? What relevance could that kind of training have for me in the non-law enforcement world? First off, I cannot stress this point enough. This is not a book for someone who wants to become a detective. Yes, if you have aspirations to be in law enforcement, there's a lot of information in this book that will help you improve your skills. However, I've adapted this approach to work for whatever profession you're in. And a lot of the experiences I had while working as a cop are in this book because the insight I gained during those interactions is just as effective in normal, everyday social encounters. Actually, some of the techniques I implemented at work, like visualizing my actions before carrying them out, were derived from my childhood, making them applicable in almost any situation. Without holding anything back, I'm going to share all the details associated with these practices so that you can incorporate them into your life. It's also worth noting that while working as a detective, I didn't want to be perceived as one-dimensional. I had aspirations to work for the FBI, so I went back to school and completed my master's degree in business management. Although my intent was to diversify my abilities, grad school also changed my perspective on leadership. If there's one thing I've learned about a police department in comparison to a private business, it's that the objectives may be different, but the core principles, such as infrastructure and the operations of the administration, are the same. Although I gained some insight while attending school, certain things can't be taught. They have to be experienced. I've had a lot of success throughout my career, but I've also seen a lot of tragedy, none of which I would wish upon anyone. I was only 23 years old when I was involved in a shooting with a man who tried to kill me. I was left with no other choice but to shoot him, and unfortunately, he did not survive his injuries. It was definitely traumatic, and I did a lot of soul-searching over the next 8 months. I still reflect back on it to this day. Do you think I learned anything about myself from that experience? Absolutely. Was what I learned more about Derrick the person and less about Derrick the cop? Of course it was. And what I took away from that incident is beneficial to everyone, not just a police officer. I will say this. I'm not a millionaire or a famous entrepreneur. If that's what you're looking for, I'm not your guy. But if you're someone like me, who believes that a large component of success is good communication, then you're in the right place. I built my career on my ability to interact and communicate with others, and what I've learned is that no matter where you go, people are people. Whether they're criminals or colleagues, the same principles apply. They're human and have mannerisms and gestures that can be suggestive of what they're thinking. If you're able to correctly interpret that information, you can use it to build stronger personal and professional relationships, which will ultimately lead to greater levels of success. From suspects to business people, from drug dealers to reputable citizens, I've dealt with them all. And I've always been able to find common ground in order to open lines of communication. By the time we get through discussing the different lessons I've learned, both in the academy and on the streets, you'll not only have an entirely new perspective on other people, but you'll also have one on your abilities and what you're truly capable of accomplishing. This will allow you to push beyond your own mental boundaries and reach your full potential. In each chapter, I'll encourage you to improve by constantly challenging yourself and those around you. I expect you to notice more, interpret better, and have a heightened awareness of opportunities relating to self-improvement. I want you to feel transformed. Think of this book as a guided tour of the major lessons I learned in law enforcement, but don't worry, you're not going to have to wear a bulletproof vest and 2 chrome pistols like Will Smith in Bad Boys, although deep down I know you might want to. All you have to do is begin each chapter with an open mind. I'll be there as we progress to explain exactly what I learned, how I used it to my advantage, and how you can apply it in your own life. Most people are never exposed to this information. No matter how many police television shows you watch, or how many detective stories you read, you never really get a taste of the actual training that I'm going to share with you because, frankly, it's not always exciting. What is exciting is implementing the knowledge you obtain during your training into your daily routine and seeing positive results. That never gets old. The approach that I'm sharing with you is perfectly appropriate for anyone, regardless of your age, gender, or occupation. One of the main differences between you and an experienced detective is that they've been trained to be more alert and to notice the little details that the average person doesn't take the time to pay attention to. I'll explain not only what to specifically look for, but also why it's important to pick up on these indicators. It's amazing what you can figure out about a person just through observing a subtle gesture. When I was working undercover and unable to go out in the public, I would watch Big Brother. The social aspect of the game reminded me a lot of my job. I would sit there with my wife and make comments like, "If I were on this show, I'd win." She'd laugh and reply with a simple, "Okay." It sounds funny, right? There I am sitting in my living room saying I'd win one of the most popular reality shows on television, and I'm sure I wasn't the only person out there saying that. But I had a different reason for wanting to be on the show than most. The things I learned during my years as a detective allowed me to develop a hybrid approach to dealing with people in all aspects of my life. I'd combined my own interpersonal skills with years of law enforcement training. As a result, I believed that the way I interacted with others would enable me to be a real contender in the game. I wanted to prove to myself that I was right. The premise of the show is a contest between personalities, which entails trying to understand your competitors by anticipating their next move and redirecting them in a way that benefits you. This is essentially what we would do in the interrogation room with the suspect. Obtain a statement, dissect their behavior, and then use that information to get what we need. Big Brother involved individuals looking to win a game, not criminals attempting to avoid apprehension. But just like the criminals, these players would be on high alert because of the setting and what was at stake. This would naturally make my job harder, but that's what I wanted. I had a unique approach to dealing with people regardless of the situation, and Big Brother was the chance to prove it. This was an opportunity for me to be placed in a controlled environment and to really test my theory out in front of 7 million people. Now you understand why I applied to be on the show. It wasn't merely because the program offered a $500,000 prize. Sure, I was interested in the cash so I could provide a better life for my wife and daughter, but it was more than that, much more. This was a chance to excel in a controlled social experiment and prove that no matter what the situation or the person I was dealing with, my approach was effective. If I could pull it off under those circumstances, I could do it anywhere. Better yet, so can you. I take pride in the fact that I was never voted out of that house and that I eventually won $575,000. I found common interests with all of my competitors. They trusted me, and I grew to understand them as individuals, which allowed me to anticipate their next move. My approach to communication and the ability to adapt ultimately resulted in my not only winning the game, but also being the first person in 16 seasons to win without ever being nominated to leave the house. This success is the clearest indication I can give you that my approach, which involves observation, communication, and adaptation, can help you in all facets of your life. My win on Big Brother was put on display for millions to see, clearly demonstrating that undercover skills, the same ones I'll teach you in this book, can enable you to have a better understanding of yourself and those around you. And make no mistake about it, I'm not writing this book because I won the show. I won the show because of what's in this book. Now you can take what I've learned and apply the same approach so you can come out a winner. So where do we begin? The same way I started my career as a rookie officer in the police academy, by building a strong foundation. You have to know the basics before we can get into the high-level stuff, and that involves figuring out who you are. You'll learn how to interact with people by taking advantage of your strengths and minimizing your weaknesses. I'll show you how to improve your natural attributes through practice and repetition, how to incorporate mental rehearsal into your daily preparation, and how to be an effective communicator both at work and during personal encounters. Along the way, you're going to learn a lot about yourself and the people in your life. While absorbing all this information, take it seriously, but have fun with it. You've survived up to this point in your life, and whether you listen to this book or not, you'll continue to do so. Look at this for exactly what it is, an opportunity to grow and improve who you are as a person. After all, that's what you're trying to do, isn't it? Do you want to be successful at work, become a more capable leader, develop stronger relationships with family and friends, grow your abilities as a communicator? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then you should get excited about what you're going to learn. The information in this book will help in those areas and many others, the same way it helped me. But from this point forward, it's not about me anymore. Now it's time for you to take advantage of the Undercover Edge. Chapter 1. Define yourself. Holy shit, how was the high school prom, bud? I laughed a little, shook my head, and said, "Oh boy, here we go. Bro, you look like you're 12. How old are you?" "I'm 20. "Geez, I'm old enough to be your father." There was an awkward silence for a second, and then I looked at him and smiled. "Does that mean I should start calling you Daddy?" And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I started my first day at the police academy. Not exactly how I had envisioned it, but it got a good laugh out of my classmates, and it definitely broke the ice. I didn't take any offense to my classmate's comments. I knew he wasn't being malicious. He was feeling the same emotions I was: anxiousness, curiosity, and excitement. His decision to bust my chops was more of a conversation starter and less of a knock on me. Before our brief interaction, no one had said a word, but after that exchange, we were more relaxed. We introduced ourselves and engaged in some small talk before we reached the entrance door of the academy. Together, we entered the two-story building, knowing this was the start of the career that we had all worked so hard for. Our class was very diverse. There were men, women, people of different backgrounds, and a wide range of ages. Although we were all different, we still shared many similarities. Most of us came from middle-class families. My dad, for example, was a stockroom manager at Brown University, and my mother worked for the school department. I had a younger brother and 2 younger sisters, and we had all grown up in Central Falls, Rhode Island. Both of my parents worked extremely hard to provide for us, and while we never went without, we certainly weren't rich either. I really can't tell you why, but I felt comfortable with most of my classmates right from the start. We had an instant bond. We all knew what we were about to go through and that it wouldn't be easy. There was a high probability that a good percentage of us wouldn't make it. This wasn't the type of test where, as long as you tried your hardest, you passed. There are no participation trophies in the police academy. They have strict guidelines and requirements that have to be met, and if you don't meet them, you're gone. It was obvious that we would need to rely on each other to make it to the end. Regardless of who we were or how we felt about entering the academy, we all had one thing in common. We wanted to graduate, and that was enough for all of us. You might be wondering why I'm telling you all of this. What does it have to do with defining who you are as a person? I was very young when I entered the academy, and as much as I hate to admit it, I still had some growing up to do. Yes, I was mature for my age, but I didn't have the life experiences that most people accumulate by the time they become a police officer. I had only graduated college a few months earlier, and knowing how to do a keg stand doesn't exactly qualify you to carry a gun. I had to redefine who I was. The academy jump-started my growing up phase earlier than it would have occurred naturally. When you realize the severity of your responsibilities, it forces you to look in the mirror and ask yourself, can I really do this? Sure, I knew being a police officer wouldn't be easy, but my vision of what it actually entailed came from movies like Training Day and Speed. It wasn't until I found myself sitting in class listening to stories from former police officers that I understood what the job really entailed. After reluctantly admitting to myself that I needed to mature as a person, I decided to make some changes in my life. Knowing that self-awareness was the key to self-improvement, I not only had to be more accountable for my actions, I also had to figure out how my mind was wired. Would I be able to handle the stressors associated with this line of work? Understanding what I was mentally capable of dealing with would allow me to define who I currently was and who I needed to become in order to perform my duties. The quickest way to improve who you are is by understanding your abilities. If your goal is to become a better quarterback for your football team, how can you determine what areas you need to work on if you've never thrown a football? The same principle applies to improving your individual characteristics. You have to know your positive and negative qualities before you can begin to achieve personal growth. Before I was hired by the Central Falls Police Department, I took a battery of psychological tests that we referred to as psych screening. While not as in-depth as psychoanalysis, psych screening can allow the applicant to determine some basic aspects of their personality. Sometimes the applicant gets nervous because they mistakenly fear that a psychologist will be able to peer into their unconscious and see their innermost thoughts. This isn't the case at all. The main purpose of the tests is to screen out people who might be unfit to work with other officers and the public. Psych screening consists of two parts: the timed portion with a pen and paper and a clinical interview with an actual psychologist. Although the whole process sounds elaborate, you can do the same type of psych screening on yourself with a little thought and without having to take a written test or meet with a doctor. Conducting your own psychological screening will put you one step closer to defining who you are. I'll outline 2 easy steps that you can take to perform a self-analysis, or psych screening, on yourself. The first step consists of analyzing your strengths, specifically those aspects of your personality that set you apart from other people. This part of your personal evaluation is pretty easy, since you're essentially patting yourself on the back, something most of us, including myself, have no problem doing. The second step is recognizing your weaknesses and embracing them. This will enable you to isolate areas of yourself that you need to work on. Once you identify the areas that need improvement, you can develop exercises or implement changes in your behavior that will assist you in strengthening your vulnerabilities. There are many techniques you can use to identify your strengths and weaknesses, as well as to better understand your relationship with yourself and others. One of the easiest and most effective tools is the Johari window, which I'll explain in more detail later in the chapter. After identifying your weaknesses and developing a strategy to improve them, what's next? The best way to determine whether your game plan for self-improvement is working is to establish goals and keep a record of your progression. By having a phone or notebook on hand, you not only have the ability to write down your goals, but you might actually capture creative insights that increase your probability of accomplishing them. Regardless of what method you choose, adding new goals, updating old ones, and monitoring your progress is a valuable practice that you should get in the habit of doing. Your personal toolkit. Imagine that you're at a construction site and you're carrying around your toolbox. The problem is you're not allowed to open it, and no one has told you what's inside. If you find yourself in this situation, it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for you to know what you're capable of accomplishing. But if you had the opportunity to look inside that toolbox, you'd have an entirely new perspective on what you could do. You would not only see what tools were available, but also their quality and current condition, allowing you to choose the best tool for the job. So, which situation would you prefer? Going in blind or being well prepared? Clearly, the worker who can see what they have to work with is going to be in a better position to get the job done. This toolkit analogy holds true for each and every one of us in life. By taking a second to assess your situation objectively, you're going to be able to move forward knowing what you personally bring to the table and how to maximize your assets. I want to take a second and emphasize that this is probably the most important chapter in the book, because this is when we figure out what's in your toolbox. Before we can move forward, we need to figure out what tools you possess. I'm going to show you how to recognize exactly what you're capable of and what might be more challenging for you. Before you can learn how to deal with everyone else, you have to know yourself. Having a strong understanding of who you are will enable you to excel when dealing with others. You'll see later in the book that the way you analyze yourself is the same way you analyze other people. By sizing someone up before interacting with them, you manage them more efficiently by prioritizing their strongest assets and utilizing them accordingly. The same idea applies when evaluating your own abilities. You might be a good speaker, but a terrible listener. Or you might have an ability to read people accurately, but an inability to effectively direct them. Whatever your situation is, being self-aware will allow you to deploy your personal assets appropriately. Discover your own superpowers. Some people refer to police officers as heroes. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I agree with that sentiment. They're out there trying to help others, and they risk their lives doing it. Maybe that's the reason I like superheroes so much. As a kid, I enjoyed collecting comics, and with all the movies coming out over the last few years, my admiration for these fictional characters has only increased. I like them all: Superman, Batman, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Captain America, and the Hulk. I could name more, but to avoid further embarrassment, I'll stop there. They all possess different abilities that I admire, but if I could only pick one, I'd have to choose Superman. I always liked the fact that he could fly, bend steel with his bare hands, and stay cool under pressure. But just like anybody else, he had to learn what his superpowers were and how to use them. In fact, he had to discover his powers and abilities through trial and error. As he figured out what he could actually do, he developed a higher level of confidence in himself. And in every subsequent story, he would find a way to use his strengths to defeat the enemy. In contrast, Spider-Man isn't as strong as Superman, but he's more agile and can climb buildings. He has the same goals as Superman, fighting crime and helping humanity, but he doesn't possess the same abilities. Instead, he uses his unique strengths, including his ability to spin webs and swing from building to building, to beat the bad guy. The point I'm trying to make is that although Superman and Spider-Man have the same goals and want similar outcomes, they have two completely different approaches. They each use what they're good at to accomplish their mission. Spider-Man doesn't try to fly or lift up buildings. He stays within his limits and ultimately achieves the same result as Superman. The way I see it, we all have superpowers. Almost everyone has one or more strengths, and once you figure out what yours are, you can begin to assess exactly how to utilize them effectively. We may have the same task, but the way we go about completing it will depend on our own individual attributes. If you're a good communicator who speaks well, but not such a great writer, then focus on speaking to convey your message. If, on the other hand, you're a great writer but not the best speaker, focus on writing a self-explanatory speech and reduce the need for improvisation. There's no predetermined set of skills needed in order to be successful. It's not written anywhere that if you can't do certain things, you're destined for failure. What I'm telling you is that instead of trying to be someone else, figure out what works for you and use that knowledge to your benefit. I've seen many police officers who want to become undercover detectives, and although they may have a passion for that line of work, it doesn't always pan out. Working in an undercover capacity requires certain qualities, and unfortunately, not all of them can be taught. It may not be easy to swallow this realization, but when officers focus on what they can do well, whether it's traffic enforcement or community policing, that's when they start to excel. Figuring out how to advance their career through the skills they do possess will lead to positive results. This doesn't mean that you can't still use the skills that aren't necessarily your best, but by prioritizing your top attributes, you're going to produce better work. Regardless of your career choice, teacher, sales clerk, mechanic, or scientist, this philosophy applies to everyone. If you find yourself in an environment where advancement has become a struggle, you have to step back and reevaluate the situation. Maybe you're going about it all wrong. Ask yourself, what position do I want to be in a year from now? Then ask, what are the possible paths I can take to get there? If you find yourself with multiple answers to the second question, then the only thing left to figure out is which of the ways you have already tried. If you answer honestly, I can almost guarantee that most of you have only tried one avenue. And that's okay. We all get tunnel vision sometimes. But now that you've tried one way, it's probably a good idea to figure out an alternative. You've already spent so much time trying to compete with others in ways that may not be your strong point. What do you have to lose by trying another option? You may find that not only do you get to where you want to be, but you also possess a talent you didn't realize you had. It's possible that you might have heard the previous example and are assuming that it only applies to your professional life. But think about it for a second. You've probably witnessed or even implemented this approach in your life already. Have you ever had a romantic interest but had trouble gaining their attention? You think to yourself, man, all the guys she dates are athletes, but I'm not. And for some strange reason, even though you know it isn't your thing, you try to impress her by signing up for the football team. When it doesn't work out because, well, you're terrible, You become discouraged. Then you think about the situation.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?